Alright, on today's video, we are going to be doing the review on the Meprolight MCO Pro. Now, I am super excited to be doing this review because I got my first look at the MCO Pro at SHOT Show back in January, and this was definitely one of my favorite optics from SHOT Show. Now, the MCO Pro is a closed emitter carbine optic, and as you can see, this is a very compact optic. But don't let the size fool you. This thing is packed full of features and this little compact red dot. Now, speaking of the size, this is the Holosun 510C. This is one of my all-time favorite red dots. I've used these for years. I've used them in countless USPSA competitions. Now, the reason I brought that up is because if we hold these up side by side, there is not much difference in the window size of the Holosun 510C and the Meprolight MCO Pro. Now, I'm not going to do a real deep dive into all the specs on the MCO Pro in this video because I've already done a full unboxing video where we went over everything in the box and all the specs of this optic, and I will link that at the end of this video. And if you don't want to go back and watch the unboxing video, I'm going to go ahead and roll the specs in right now. Now that we've got that out of the way, I think it's time we have some fun. Let's head out to the range, start shooting some rounds downrange, and we'll come back and talk more about this optic. Now, the first thing I had to do was get this optic sighted in. I went ahead and mounted the Jackal and the Sunway Photo tripod, and I just put a 20-yard zero on this due to the fact that we were shooting in the competition bay, and all of the targets in the competition bay were going to be close range targets. Now, we are going to change the zero later on when we move over to the 100-yard rifle range. Now, getting this optic zeroed only took a few rounds. And one thing that we talked about in the unboxing video is how tactile and audible the adjustments are on this optic. Very nice positive clicks. Now, the first thing that I noticed was how clear the glass was. Meprolight is definitely using some very nice glass in this MCO Pro. Now, it was a pretty nice day. We had snow on the ground, the sun was shining, and brightness was definitely not an issue with this red dot. This red dot is plenty bright enough. Now, when I first turned the dot on, I turned it all the way up, looked through the lens, and then I ended up turning it down to level 6 or 7, and that was all I needed for the conditions we were shooting in. Now, as far as the dot goes, it's pretty crisp. I'm getting a little bit of starbursting, but I do have astigmatism, so that is not the dot's fault. It's a pretty crisp dot. But all in all, even if you have astigmatism, I think you're going to be pretty happy with this dot. Now, one other really nice thing about this optic is the fact that it has a multi-reticle system. So it uses a 2 MOA red dot with a 68 MOA circle, or what Meprolight likes to call a speed ring. And the third reticle it has is what they call a 3-segment reticle. Now, you do have the option to run either just the 2 MOA dot, or you can run the 2 MOA dot with the 68 MOA speed ring, or you can run the 3-segment reticle. And I can also tell you, when you run the dot and the circle, or the 3-segment reticle, it is insanely bright. Now, the MCO Pro also has 2 brightness modes. So you have manual brightness, which is where you're just going to use the up and down arrow on the side to adjust your level of brightness up or down. And if you look here on the front of the optic right here in this corner, it has a sensor, and that is for the auto brightness. And if you are not familiar with auto brightness, I have a few optics that have it, and basically what it does, you are going to let the optic adjust your brightness level due to the conditions you are shooting in. Now, I've got you zoomed in on the optic so you can see the up and down buttons. So let me explain to you how you switch between different modes. To change your reticle, you're going to hold the down button for 3 seconds to switch from one reticle to the next. If you hold the up button for 3 seconds, that is how you're going to switch between auto brightness and manual brightness. Now, when you're using manual brightness, when you're adjusting your brightness level all the way up or all the way down, when you get to the 10 setting or the 1 setting, the dot is going to flash to let you know that you are either at the highest level of brightness or the lowest level of brightness. And if you want to manually shut the optic off, you will hold the up and down button together for 3 seconds, and that will shut the optic off. As soon as you hit the up or down button, the optic will come back on. And keep in mind, if you do manually shut the optic off, the shake awake is not going to work. You will have to manually turn it back on and let the optic shut itself off. Now, after I wrapped up in the competition bay, I came back the next day to test the MCO Pro out over on the rifle range. Now, we've got permanent steel plates set up on the rifle range at 100 yards and 200 yards. And the plates that are on the 100-yard range go from 12-inch all the way down to a 4-inch plate. Now, normally, I like to use a magnified optic when I'm shooting the steel plates at 100 yards, but I was actually shocked how good my accuracy was with this optic at 100 yards. Now, with the big window and the clear glass, I was not having any issues at all seeing the plates, and the red dot was nice and bright and crisp on the white steel plates. Now, I was only using the red dot. I was not using the dot and circle or the 3-segment reticle. And even on the 4-inch plate at 100 yards with the 2 MOA dot, I was still able to see the outline of the 4-inch white steel plate. Alright, my final thoughts on the Meprolight MCO Pro. I love this little optic. I got super hyped up when I saw it at SHOT Show, and I really want to thank Meprolight for sending this out to the channel for me to test out and review. It definitely did not disappoint. So we're not going to drag this final thoughts out because we've already talked about all the positive stuff about this optic throughout the video. One thing that we did not talk about was that it does have a side load battery, which is super cool. And as far as the mount on this, we had no issues with this thing coming loose or losing zero. And if you weren't paying attention when I rolled the specs in, Meprolight does have an option for you to buy an additional riser for this if you do want to put it up a little bit higher. Now, I want to talk about 2 things before we get out of here. Now, these aren't necessarily cons, but I do think it's 2 things we need to go over. Now, this optic obviously has shake awake, but I will tell you this optic is super sensitive. It took me almost 4 hours to figure out if the shake awake on this optic was working or not. Now, I had this optic sitting here on this bench that we're using in the studio, and when I walk around in here, the bench does have a tendency to move just a little bit, and that was enough to trigger the shake awake on this optic. Then I moved it out to the dining room and set it up on the table out there, and just from me walking back and forth through the dining room, it was enough to trigger the shake awake. So what I had to do was take the jackal outside, I kept it in the turret rest, I set it on the concrete, I set a camera up right behind the optic. I waited an hour because it does take an hour for the optic to shut off. And as you can see here, the shake awake does work. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that this is very sensitive compared to some optics. And you may not think the shake awake's working, but it actually is. Now, the second thing that happened on this optic that was kind of weird, and I did reach out to Matt from RTT Guns and Gear to ask him if he's had this issue. And he said that he has had this issue with multiple dots with larger windows like this. But basically what was going on, depending on where the sun was shining out in front of where I was shooting, every now and then I would see the circle, even though I had the dot and the circle turned off and was only using the red dot. Now, it wasn't like the circle was really bright like the dot was. It's just I could see like a faded circle. It only happened a couple times, but it is something that I did want to bring up before we get out of here. So all in all, this optic is absolutely awesome, and it was a lot of fun testing it out on this Jackal. Now it is a little bit on the pricey side, but I definitely think it's well worth the money. Now speaking of the Jackal, we've done a lot of things to this gun. Obviously we added the Meprolight, we added the Die Free Company Kung Fu grip and the Tiger Claw hand stop, and we did put this awesome new trigger in it. So there's going to be a lot more content coming up here on the channel with the Jackal. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.